Hello, so welcome back to chapter 3 and 4. We're gonna talk more about the suspenseful, super clever rescue mission. Elmer is going on that dangerous mission to rescue a baby dragon trapped on Wild Island. And getting there will not be easy. Remember, he has to be very smart and use clever tricks, and he needs lots of courage. So let's root for Elmer. So, Elmer, a young boy, is hiding on a huge ship. And how could you sneak past a whole group of sailors? I mean, the sailors are everywhere, and if they see Elmer, they might send him right back home. So Elmer has to get off the ship without anyone knowing that he is a boy. So how do you think he does that? And that brings us to this first stop, the sneaky stowaway. Stowaway is a person who gets on a boat without any permission. They're usually hiding. So basically, he's hiding in a plain sight. And we know that Elmer is clever, so he knew that he could just not walk off the ship like a normal passenger. He needs to stay hidden, basically, and have a smart plan. So for 6 days and nights, Elmer hid deep inside the dark ship, and twice he almost got caught while sailor came to load more cargo, and cargoes are the luggages. So then Elmer heard that ship would stop at a place called Cranberry to unload bags of wheat, and that gave him an idea. So later that afternoon, Elmer secretly climbs into one of the wheat bags, and then Sailor picks up the bag and tossed it into big cargo net without knowing Elmer was inside it. So Elmer stayed very quiet and waited until nighttime. So when it became dark, he carefully sneaked off the ship and stepped onto the sandy beach island. So, I mean, look at this 3-step plan, right? He first took out an empty grain bag that said cranberry. Remember, he had the bag, and which he had packed it in his knapsack earlier. And then he climbed inside the bag with his heavy knapsack and folded the top closed, and he wrapped a rubber band around the top to keep it shut. Now, Elmer did not look like a boy anymore. He now looked like a sack of wheat. So when the sailors came to unload the cargo, one sailor looked at Elmer's bag and said, "That is the strangest bag of wheat I've ever seen. It's all lumpy." Oh man, inside the bag, Elmer tried very hard to stay still. I bet he was very scared. But he really did feel like a sack of wheat, which means it's a funny way of saying that someone's not moving at all. So the sailor tossed Elmer right into the cargo net, and even the captain wrote it down on his clipboard that says, "1 bag of dry corn on the cob." And he said that because another sailor picked up the bag and accidentally squeezed Elmer's elbow. And sailor said, "I know what this is. It's a bag of dried corn on the cob." So they just couldn't even imagine that it could be a boy ever. And that leads us to the island of Tangerines, a sweet but definitely a scary stop. So after Elmer escaped from the ship, he woke up on the beach feeling very hungry. He started looking for food when suddenly, bonk, something hit him on the head. It was a tangerine falling from a tree. Elmer saw that the tree was full of big, sweet, wild tangerines, and he was so hungry that he picked and ate 31 tangerines. Then he filled his pockets with as many tangerines as he could carry and began walking along the shore toward the dangerous wild island. So as Elmer walked around the shore, he met a fisherman. Elmer asked him about Wild Island. The fisherman became very scared. He shook and shivered as he spoke. In a quiet, trembling voice, he said, "Many people tried to explore Wild Island, but none of them ever came back. We think the wild animals ate them." Now that warning sounded very frightening, but Elmer was brave, and he did not turn around or give up. He simply kept walking toward Wild Island. And that leads us to crossing the ocean rocks, a very slippery, jumpy journey. At last, Elmer saw Wild Island far away in the ocean. A long line of rocks stretched across the water to the island. Elmer remembered the alley cat's advice, so he waited until the night was very dark before crossing. He did not want the wild animals to see him. He put on his black rubber boots, ate a few more tangerines for energy, and carefully stepped onto the slippery rock. The waves crashed around him, and sometimes he had to run and jump over the water. Then Elmer heard a deep rumbling sound. It grew louder and louder in the dark night. What could make such a huge snoring noise out in the middle of the ocean? So Elmer jumped toward the noise and suddenly realized something shocking. He had landed right on the back of a small whale that was fast asleep. The whale was snuggled between two rocks and snoring super loudly. Luckily, the whale was making so much noise that it did not even wake up when Elmer politely said, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." So Elmer quietly tiptoed off the whale's back and kept moving toward Wild Island. Elmer climbed, slipped, and jumped from one slippery rock to another in the dark. 7 hours, that is a very long time to keep going without giving up. Hooray, Elmer! The waves crashed around him and the rocks were wet and dangerous, but Elmer stayed brave and persistent and kept moving forward. Finally, while it was still dark outside, Elmer stepped off the very last rock. After 7 long hours, he had finally made it to Wild Island. Its lucky number. So then, next chapter is Tricks in the Scary Jungle. Hide and seek in the dark. And let me tell you, this jungle was thick, dark, and damp. Now, as soon as Elmer reached Wild Island, he almost got caught. The jungle began right next to the beach. Elmer crawled under a bush to hide. He ate a few more tangerines and slept through the daytime so the wild animals would not see him. Later that afternoon, Elmer woke up and realized he was not alone. He felt a tiny paw touching his knapsack and heard a little voice talking. It was a small mouse. The mouse looked at the knapsack in confusion and mixed up its words, saying funny things like, "What a queer little rock." Then the mouse hurried away accidentally and said, "I must smell somebody. Tell somebody." Uh-oh. Elmer knew he had to move quickly before the mouse came back with wild animals and he spreads all the rumors that he's there. So Elmer walked quietly through the dark, creepy jungle. Then suddenly, achoo! He sneezed very loudly. Right away, a voice called out from the darkness, "Is that you, monkey?" "Oh, what is that about?" Then Elmer gave quite a scare, but he quickly answered, "Yes." And the voice said, "You must have something on your back, monkey." Elmer was wearing his knapsack. Now he had to think fast. What could a monkey be carrying on in a back in the middle of the night, on his back in the middle of the night? This part shows how quickly Elmer can think. And then another voice in the dark suddenly said, "I bet you are carrying your sick grandmother to the doctor." Elmer answered right away, again, yes, and hurried away as fast as he could. Later, Elmer realized he had been talking to 2 tortoises in the dark. Tortoises are kind of like turtles. Instead of arguing and explaining who he really was, Elmer simply let them believe their funny idea about a monkey carrying a sick grandmother. That way, nobody guessed he was really a boy with a knapsack seeking through the jungle. I think it's really smart to just let some people think whatever they want to think. Now, next part is the clue of the peels. The wild boars investigate. The boars are kind of like mountain pigs. So as Elmer walked through the jungle, he almost bumped into 2 huge dark shapes. At first, they looked like a giant rock, but they were actually 2 wild boars. Elmer quickly hid in the shadows and listened carefully. The boars were talking like detectives trying to solve a mystery. The first boar said they had to find 3 important clues. First, they found fresh tangerine peels under the wahoo bush. Second, a mouse reported seeing a very strange rock that suddenly disappeared. Third, they found even more fresh tangerine peels nearby. The boar knew the tangerine did not grow on Wild Island. That meant someone must have crossed the ocean rocks and come to the island. Without meaning to, Elmer had left behind a trail of clues with all his tangerine snacking. Oh no! Luckily, the second boar told the first boar that Mouse was probably not very reliable, meaning she's not very trustful. The boar also guessed that tangerine peels might have floated in from the ocean. Soon, the boar went back to sleep. But Elmer learned a very important lesson. He realized he must stop leaving clues behind. From that moment on, whenever he ate a tangerine, he saved every single peel in his pocket instead of dropping it on the ground. Elmer was becoming a smarter and sneakier explorer every minute. After walking carefully through the jungle all night, Elmer finally reached a river just as the sun was coming up. He knew the dragon was tied up somewhere nearby, but now his adventure was about to get even harder. What kinds of animals and dangerous animals were waiting by the river? How could Elmer use the strange things in his knapsack to outsmart them? Well, you will have to keep reading to find out what happens next. Thank you for joining on this adventure, and I'll see you in our next chapters. Bye! If you'd like more personalized feedback, writing support, and discussion sessions, they're available with me or with our selected tutors. All the details are here.